Toxic people. In this video, we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to give you 5 tips to help you deal with that toxic person in your life, whether it's a family member, a friend, a coworker, doesn't matter. Sit tight. So I remember when I was a kid, I had this really vivid dream of this big, green, ugly monster, really tall, and it was trying to attack me or eat me, whatever. And I remember I had a wooden stick in my hand, and I was trying to defend myself against this monster. I was holding it up in front of me, and this monster was trying to do its thing, right? This is kind of how I feel what it's like dealing with a toxic person in your life. You're holding the stick up. You're trying to defend yourself against this person's words or actions or whatever they're doing to you. Now, we all know toxic people can be like the aggressor. They could be like the green monster, or they could be more passive aggressive in their approach. They can be manipulative. They can be passive aggressive. These are some key signs, even though you probably know them already. Number one, you feel drained around somebody, right? You feel reactive around somebody. You just don't feel good. There's no benefit that they offer to you. Often you feel triggered by them. They tend to bring out your insecurities. And the last thing is that often they'll play the role of the victim. They'll try to twist things around where they become like the poor me type of person. There's different scenarios of toxic people. I know I did a podcast a while ago on energy vampires and toxic people. If you want to check it out, I'll put the link below. But there's different scenarios, different types, different dynamics, okay, depending who it is. So for a lot of people, toxic relationships or a toxic person can be family. And it's not so easy to limit your exposure to something like family or a coworker who you see every day. Friends may be a little bit easier because you necessarily may not live with them or see them all the time. And, it is a good rule of thumb to limit your exposure, number one, to toxic people in your life so you don't get drained of energy. But here's the catch, okay? Toxic people or being triggered by a toxic person is not necessarily, and you may not like to hear this, is not necessarily about the other person, but a lot of times it's about you and how you're responding to that person. So in this video, I'm going to give you a few tips on how to deal with that and how to deal with this person in your life. Like I said, in a lot of cases, we may not be able to limit our exposure. Say it's family, and they're draining us or they're being manipulative in some sort of sense where they're playing the victim or the role of the victim. Now, the thing with a toxic person or an energy vampire, for example, they're not always the same. Usually energy vampires are toxic, right? Because they're draining you of something. But not always, because an energy vampire could be just somebody who is on a different vibrational match with you, different vibrational frequency, where they're really overpowering to your body's energy and they're just draining you. So that's not necessarily a toxic person, but usually a toxic person is also an energy vampire. Okay, so an energy vampire isn't always a toxic person, but a toxic person usually has some sort of energy vampire-ness within them. Okay, because they do drain you of something. What they do is they look for holes in your aura and they try to pick up on your vulnerable spots and they feed off of that. So the first thing is that a toxic person will expect you to act a certain way around them. Whether they do it consciously or unconsciously, a lot of times it can be unconsciously, especially if this person is a little passive aggressive, they have a subtle manipulative approach. It can be because of, say, their childhood, okay? They grew up in similar type of environment and they're not even aware that they're doing it, that they're projecting onto other people, okay? In their more subtle kind of techniques. Sometimes they're aware, other times they're not aware. But the number one thing is to do the unexpected. Okay, there's one of the books I like to talk about is a book called Reality Transurfing by Russian physicist Vadim Zeland. And in this book, really cool stuff, he talks about something called energetic pendulums. And these are basically energetic thought structures. So think of politics. Think of when you go to a sports game and everybody's acting the same, or if people are doing the wave, it's like you follow along. So it's these thought structures where they're trying to get you, the energy is trying to pull you in a sort of way. And this is a good example of a toxic person, okay? They're almost like this structure, this entity. Think of the green monster, okay? This pendulum that's trying to suck you into their world, their script. So they're going to expect you to act a certain way, right? When you go to a sports game, you're almost expected to act a certain way. But if you do the unexpected or you disengage, it throws the monster off course, throws the pendulum off course, because it feeds off of your response, your reaction mode. So when you're triggered by somebody who's very toxic in your life, say it's a family member, they want that. It helps them grow. They feed off of that, right? Feeding off your insecurities. So if you do the unexpected, number one, either disengage from a conversation, or number two, do something really out of the ordinary, random. Start dancing, I don't know, start singing. Person will be like, what the, you know? So it throws them off course. Number two, setting boundaries. You've heard this before. Just because somebody is close to you, just because they're blood, just because it's a husband or a wife, even a kid, or in some cases, right? Especially an older child of yours, doesn't mean that you shouldn't set boundaries. A lot of times we're people pleasers. We think that we feel guilty, right? We feel guilty for not going along with not only how somebody expects us to act, but we feel selfish if we set boundaries. But there's a complete difference between that. And that's a fabrication of the mind, first of all, where we're thinking of setting boundaries in the first place with somebody like family is selfish. It's not selfish. Often it's needed. Because what happens when we don't set boundaries with other people, we don't say, limit our exposure to them, limit our time with them, not saying yes to everything they ask of us, okay? Not, again, that's being sucked in, that's being pulled in by this structure, by this entity, by this monster that's feeding off of our response. But setting our limitations, putting up a wall when we need to, saying no when we need to, not saying yes to every activity when we're not feeling it. What happens is if we say yes to everything, and this doesn't just apply to toxic people, this goes for everything in life. If we always say yes, when we are feeling a little less than, we're not feeling grounded, we're not having a good day, what happens is we are open, we are now exposed to everything, okay? It's like if we go outside and it's negative 13 degrees out and we take off all our layers and we're naked, we're now exposed to all kinds of stuff, okay? In Chinese medicine, they call it EPFs, external pathogenic factors, and we eventually get sick. All right, so it's the same with that. If we're constantly vulnerable and exposed to other people, then we're obviously going to feel more triggered. We're obviously going to feel more reactive to these types of people because we didn't set our protection mechanisms out in the first place. We have no protection, okay? It's going outside in negative 13 degree weather without a coat. We're going to freeze. We're going to be more uncomfortable than if we had something on. So number three is a good one. It's stop reacting to the reaction. Okay, our body is going to feel a certain way around a person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to fight it all the time. We don't have to resist it. Because what happens if we know we're going to feel a certain way or we start to get tense around somebody, we get more tense because we fight that. We don't want to feel that around somebody. Say you're going to visit your family and you start getting like uptight and triggered and suddenly in your head you're like, no, I can't feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. That makes it worse. By the way, makes it worse. So feel what you need to feel. Feel it run through your body. It's not going to kill you. It's just a feeling. It's just a trigger. It's just a reaction that you're going through, okay? The brain controls the body's reaction, okay? And the brain is tied to past experiences. So what happens when we start feeling something, it's basically relating back to something we've already felt before. And it felt uncomfortable. We didn't like how it felt. So we say, no, I don't want to feel that again. So we get more uptight, we get more tense. But if we let it run through us, it's like anxiety in a lot of cases. A lot of people fight the anxiety. They say, I shouldn't feel this way. Something wrong with me. No, if you felt it and you let it course through your body, almost like a wave, then you would see that it actually dissipates over time. So a lot of times it's that we resist, okay? We resist our reaction to somebody. But if we actually just feel it in our bodies, actually pay attention to it. A lot of times we don't pay attention to what we're actually feeling, and that's the problem. We get in our heads about it. Get in your body, actually feel it, and understand that this is my body's reaction to something that's happened in my past or something that I've encountered before, which leads me to the next tip, which is stop forcing things, letting go of outcomes, okay? A lot of times when we are going in, we know we're seeing somebody who's very toxic, say it's a friend, say it's a coworker who we have to see every day. A lot of times we're playing that scenario of what's going to happen in our head before the reality actually happens. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we actually play this movie script in our mind of what's going to happen before it actually happens. So that may not actually happen, but in our head it actually happened. So we're tense before we even go into it. You know what I'm saying? So it's letting go of the outcome of how it's going to play out. Maybe it won't be quite as bad as anticipated, but you think it's going to be worse than anticipated, thereby making it worse, okay? It's getting into this place of being in this headspace where we're like, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. So it's more about being present when you're around that person so you can actually observe how you're feeling. And if you're feeling discomfort, you're feeling discomfort. Okay, now what? All right, I'm not going to be around this person forever. I'm going to eventually leave this conversation, leave this place. Okay, but if we don't set our boundaries to begin with and we go in tense and we go in vulnerable and we're not paying attention and we're going in just through our heads and we've already played it out a million times, then of course we're going to be triggered. Of course we're going to have a reaction mode to it. And my next tip is, and you're probably not going to like this one either, is to stop blaming. We want to blame everybody and everything. Okay, it's anger. Okay, we feel hurt because of what somebody did to us in our past. I understand that. But blaming somebody and projecting out onto somebody else is basically doing the exact same thing that somebody is doing to us. Sometimes people are put in our lives or they're in our lives as a way for us to look at some sort of unhealthy pattern in our life. In a lot of cases, people will date the same kinds of people, have the same kinds of friends who treat them like crap, be in the same type of positions or scenarios. Realize that life is like a movie, right? So not only are you, in many cases, with the dynamic between a toxic person, say it's a friend who's known you a long time, a family member who's known you a long time, what they're basically doing, they're attaching to, say, an older version of you. So if you have parent-child relationship, for example, that parent is always going to view the child as the child, even if the child is now 50 years old or 60 years old or 40 years old, it doesn't matter. They're always going to kind of view them in the same way, and they're always going to attach to that version. So if you've grown as a person, other people don't necessarily grow with you because everybody has their own perspective on life, their own view, their own movie that they're playing in. So this person is, acting in their own movie, and then you're a character in their movie. And then you have your own movie, but you're your own director of your own script. So stop going along with other people's script. So I may have gotten off track with that one, but I want to go back to, I just wanted to mention that, by the way. But let me go back to blaming, okay? So blaming is almost like being in that person's movie, because that's what is expected of you. It's expected of you. But I would say is rise above the blame and realize when you're doing it, because a lot of times you don't realize that you're projecting out. And when we're projecting, it's basically a reflection of something going on inside of us. We feel hurt, we feel insecure in some sort of way. We probably know this already, but become aware of it and rise above it, okay? So, the last thing I want to mention is view this toxic person in your life. View them as their child self. I know that sounds silly in a lot of cases, but it can be helpful, because just realize that when somebody is very toxic, or they're an energy vampire, or they're projecting onto you, or they're criticizing you, or they're trying to manipulate you, or they're playing the victim all the time, that's their child self hurting. It's calling out. Okay, and it's something that a lot of people do unconsciously, because they've never dealt with their own stuff, basically. So if you can, when you're talking to this person, for example, instead of just being in reaction trigger mode all the time, okay, just letting your head take over and your body take over, but having no grounding within you, not having control of your own script, of your own movie, instead being in their movie and being, I don't know, antagonist and all kinds of stuff, shit going down. View them like a child, okay? Because everybody's got a child inside, right? Everybody's a little child just waiting to break out. Everybody wants love. Everybody wants connection. Everybody wants to be validated and acknowledged in some sort of way. We know this, right? Look at yourself. Look at where you feel vulnerable. Of course you feel these things because your child self may be hurt, a long time ago. But when you're talking to somebody, it's almost like public speaking. And when they say, visualize everybody's naked in the room. It's similar to that. Visualize you're talking to this person's child, okay? To their soul, something like that. I know it's going to be hard when somebody's a soul sucker and somebody's like a monster and you really you can't find anything good or positive about them. But I'm just saying sometimes it helps to shift your perspective on that person. Realize that they're hurting too. What they're doing to you, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying we should encourage it by any means. But what I am saying is that you always have control of your reaction and how you're responding. So when you're just projecting back, you're feeding the monster. That's what the monster wants. It wants to aggravate you. It wants to suck you in. It feeds off of that. It feeds off of that. It feeds off of that. That's all I'm saying. So if you can do the unexpected, okay? Do the unexpected. Disengage or do something out of the ordinary. I don't know. It will help. So these are just a few tips when dealing with a toxic person in your life. It's not always easy because a lot of times it runs deep, say it's with somebody that, and one more thing I want to mention is a lot of times we hold on to relationships and we hold on to things, say friendships, okay, or even habits. We do things even though they don't make sense anymore. We hold on to things even though they don't benefit us anymore because we're scared of change. Because we think that just because we've acted a certain way that we need to hang on to that, even if now we feel like we're almost faking it or pretending. It's like, oh, let me keep eating this even though I don't like it anymore, just because I used to like it. So I'm going to pretend that I still like it because in my own way, it's some messed up thing that I do or my ego does to try to convince myself that I still like it. I don't know. So this goes more with friendships than family because we can't always cut off ties with blood, but friendships that no longer serve us and we're still kind of holding on even though we have nothing in common with the person anymore, even though we know we've distanced ourselves a lot, but we still hang out with them. Why? It's almost like we're punishing ourselves in a sort of way. So just look at that for a second, okay? And a lot of times that's where toxic relationships come in, because we're not on the same page anymore. Even though we used to be, we realize we can't always fix things. We can't always change things. We can't always force it, right? We can't force it. We can only force our own script, but we can't force other people's. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments below. I put out new videos every single week for you on self-empowerment, self-help, Chinese medicine, all kinds of cool stuff. So hit that button, and until next time, I will see you on the next video. Peace.